took what I want, but you find that everything they've got, you step forwards to my shadow, you are follow in my pattern.
Hello and welcome to the Ladies' Room. I'm Judy McDowell, and today my guest is Kevin McAllister, who is an advocate for our water, people, so important. He is the founder and president of Defend H2O, and you've been doing this for 14 years?
Since 2014 with
Yeah.
Defend H2O and 25 years of clean water advocacy
Yeah.
On the East End.
You are the baykeeper for Suffolk County or
That
the
was
East
a
End?
nonprofit organization as well.
For 16 years?
Correct, yes.
So you've been at this a long time.
I have, and then there's the earlier chapter in South Florida for roughly 15 years. Working in environmental protection down there. So I've worked in government, private sector consulting, and nonprofit world for 25 years now.
So Defend H2O is based in Sag Harbor, and what do you do out here, and how did you get that started?
It's a nonprofit organization in the eyes of New York State and the IRS. The mission is to protect and restore water quality and coastal habitat within the East End, and greater Suffolk County is really where I operate. We bring science to the fore. That's first and foremost in our advocacy work, public education, and then on occasion, if we find the laws are being broken and not adhered to, we will employ litigation as well.
How do you keep people from putting pesticides on their lawns and the golf courses? I mean, I read in the paper that Suffolk County used more than 6.5 pounds?
I don't
Million.
know the
6.5
data. I recall
million
that
pounds of pesticides.
we led the
in
state in
2022.
residential
Yes.
pesticide use.
And that leaches down into our single source aquifer,
Uh,
our watershed.
In part,
Yeah.
just physically, the coastal zone is a transition area with our
The runoff.
marine waters, our bays, our oceanfront, of course, and then the landmass. So the coastal zone, that transition zone, is extremely important as to land use, the chemical applications, because there is basically leaching and interaction with sea level rise.
Yeah.
And what I am seeing over the last 30 years, I think everyone has that lives locally, is the ramping up of residential pesticide use.
Yeah,
The
lawn
little yellow
shaming.
signs on,
Poison on my lawn.
Yeah, it's like whack-a-mole in the neighborhood. This house today, a week later, it's 3 houses down, and then it's back to the neighbor in between. And
Yeah.
it's a growing problem, and all of these pesticides. Basically, it's a cocktail going down into groundwater, and then that groundwater moves to the receiving waters, our bays, and we are seeing, pesticide levels in some of the receiving waters. That's alarming.
Yeah. They've been doing a lot of testing in the springs, and is it Gardner Bay there? What's the?
Both in surface water as well as there is groundwater testing. Suffolk County Water Authority, in order to protect their drinking water sources, employs a great deal of testing. And then various government agencies, principally Suffolk County, has monitored the estuary for many years. Repeated stations to monitor water quality and trends.
Yeah. So you're working on water quality restoration. How does that
That's
happen?
a very broad topic. I try to identify issues that I think are far-reaching, significant. One being certainly the wastewater management in Suffolk County, how we employ and how we deal with our sewage. And for decades, it's been pretty rudimentary treatment, a septic pit, which leaches down into groundwater. We are seeing with increased development density, more households, increases in the nitrogen levels in groundwater and thus into the receiving waters. And there's a fine line, too much nitrogen or phosphorus, another nutrient, in ponds or bays. If it exceeds certain levels, then it triggers these algal blooms that deplete oxygen. You know, it's
Yeah, Georgia
reoccurring
Pond
cycle.
has a big
Correct.
problem with that.
Reoccurring algal
Yeah.
blooms, blue-green algae. I mean, it's every color of the spectrum.
Blue-green algae you can eat and it's healthy for you.
I think depends on
Where it's grown in
Yeah.
Utah in a pristine lake.
There's a microsystem. There is a toxin in the blue-green algae that is.
There is.
Yes.
We took it for years.
Maybe if it's dried out, I don't know.
Yeah, well, they grew it in a pristine lake in Utah and it was processed, I guess, somehow, but it was alive.
But with climate change, the warming, just slight warming of waters, there's so many little nuances that are
Yes.
affecting water quality. And then, as I said, with that interaction as sea level comes up, it's going to penetrate deeper inland. We have what's called saltwater intrusion that can affect water potability, drinkable water, because it becomes too briny, too salty.
Yeah.
So
Where
it's-
is that happening, the saltwater
I
intrusion?
believe that Napeague stretch and
Uh-huh.
sections of Montauk, the North Fork has saltwater intrusion. So,
Wow.
the Water Authority, which deploys public water, if you will, they have to move wells on occasion when there's a threat of intrusion, saltwater intrusion. In other words, and if a well goes that way, it never comes back. So we've got to be very conscious of the drawdown. So the excessive irrigation, it's mind-blowing. I ride a bicycle
Over 3 trillion gallons?
I ride a bicycle very early in the morning. I see all the neighborhoods in East Hampton Town, and the
And
amount
half
of
the sprinkler
water
water's
is-
going in the street.
Correct. Destroying
It's crazy.
and breaking road beds up. I see that, and just really pumping the chemicals, because over irrigation normally has those, or regularly has the yellow signs of pesticide applications.
And then it just
So
washes right
hydraulically,
down.
we are pumping that into groundwater, into the ponds, into the bays. And, it's gonna catch up with us if we don't recognize it soon and start to really change our individual ways. And I think it may require government to step in and try to impose regulations and restrictions on overuse.
Look at California, they had no water and I think they banned watering their lawns completely. During COVID it happened, I think.
Well, there were warnings, again, by Suffolk County Water Authority this summer, when we got into drought conditions that, water
It's
supply
happening,
was threatened.
water is a big problem everywhere.
But the water hogs, what I see firsthand, the behavior has not changed. And right down to a small residential property, the sprinklers are going constantly.
And what they don't understand is that if they water every day, the grass gets water, it has no reason to send its roots down deep to get
Correct.
the water.
It's
If they watered once a week or just waited for it to rain, the grass would be healthier and stronger.
Correct. Yeah.
And less crabgrass and stuff that can grow anywhere without anything. People don't understand that.
So between the over irrigation and the pesticide and fertilizer applications, again, more intense over the decades.
Yeah.
And it's becoming a real problem in that pump into, again, receiving waters.
It's shocking to me that when you go to Home Depot, there's a huge Roundup display still. And that's really a killer pesticide.
Glyphosate, yes,
Yeah.
it sure is. And I believe the tip of the iceberg as to what we know, the environmental implications of glyphosate out there, I believe we haven't touched on it yet. We haven't realized the damage that is.
What does it do to the human body if you're ingesting that water?
It's,
Cancer.
of course, it's carcinogenic.
Chemicals, yeah.
We know that, but on a ecological level, the disruptions in the food chain and,
Yeah, the
you know,
insects, the birds we're
correct.
losing. We lose, we lose a species of birds like every day.
You know, and if you're following the health of the bays, one of the canaries is our eelgrass.
Eelgrass.
Eelgrass grows on the bottom, supports bay scallops, host of its habitat. It's important. That has all but disappeared in
I haven't seen any.
many parts of the estuary, and what we have seen from some of the monitoring, herbicides are showing up. So glyphosate, is that being pumped now into the bays where a plant that's growing on the bottom is being essentially poisoned at its roots because of the presence in the estuary?
Isn't there someone in the springs growing like kelp gardens? Did I read
There's
that?
quite a few kelp farmers.
Yeah, because that's really healthy to eat. It's got a lot
Correct.
of
There's
nutrients.
there's
I
certainly
would think
a
that's
commercial commercial product
Yeah.
for it. Yes.
Nature is so set up to work, like in Mexico and Florida, the mangrove swamps.
I know them
They
well. Yes.
filter the salt out and release clean water.
The mangrove swamps provide a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
You know, so dampening that surge in hurricane season. So for
Yeah.
coastal resiliency, they're extremely
Yeah.
important as a buffer.
Yep.
Critical habitat for a host of wildlife,
Spiders.
marine life. They cleanse the water, nutrient uptake, oxygen release. These forests are extremely important, and you know, in some parts of the world, mangroves are being deforested for other land use.
Look what they're doing in the rainforest. Go talk about deforestation.
You know,
It's crazy. Crazy things going on in this planet. And nature somehow overcomes it, but it's a real battle now.
Nature
For
is healing, of
survival.
course, and same with
Yeah.
our waterways, extremely resilient, can cleanse themselves.
Yes.
But I'll call it the spigots of pollution problems. The nutrients, the pesticides, sewage. We've got to start to control those and reduce those inputs, and then in turn we will see recovery of waters very quickly.
So this big project that Adam Potter wants to do in Sag Harbor, I read that he was saying that he's going to do a whole new sewage system because Sag Harbor's over the top now with sewage. This summer there was so much rain at the end that people were in all the restaurants and using the facilities.
Sag Harbor has a municipal sewage treatment plant, so a network of pipes collecting wastewater,
Right.
delivering it to the facility on Bay Street, and then it discharges into the harbor. I'm not
It
sure.
discharges into the harbor as clean water?
Treated water.
Treated water.
It's polluted water.
Ugh.
It's never.
So what can we
it's
do?
not pure
What can
water.
a normal person do? Join a advocacy group, or what can they do at home to?
We need to educate ourselves, start to be informed. There's a number of groups and individuals that can help guide, say, property management for homeowners to do better. Edwina Von Gaal, I'll drop an expert out there for helping with native gardens. She's a local. I know Edwina would be delighted to help anyone transform a turf lawn into a native garden for all the benefits for clean water and wildlife habitat. So we can absolutely make improvements. It does start at home, but we've got to commit to these transformations into a more bay-friendly yard. Less turf, less fertilizers, get off the pesticides. Native gardens, wildflowers to attract butterflies and birds.
I planted all these wildflowers, a whole big thing, and the deer ate them all as food. I love the deer. There's only a couple of houses in my neighborhood that do not have deer fences. So the deer have these corridors.
Yes. Yeah.
And they eat everything on our property. They eat holly, they eat rhododendrons now, but
Yeah,
they've trimmed everything up beautifully.
our ecosystem's out of whack, and
Yes,
there's
we've
no
encro-
natural
We've
ecosystem
encroached
here.
on their habitats so
We
badly,
are
it's just
a
terrible.
suburbanized environment, we have been for a number of
Not
years. And
fair, yeah.
it's, it's, the intensity's growing, so we have to be cognizant of it as a community. And again, affect collective change and practice individual change.
Yeah. So, what projects are you working on now?
There was disappointment this summer with the Suffolk County Legislature.
The
They
Clean Water
failed
Act?
to approve, basically approval for a referendum item
On the ballot that
on
we
the
could
ballot
vote
in
on.
November on
Yeah.
Election Day,
Yeah,
which would have allowed for increasing basically a clean water fund, a 1/4% sales tax by an eighth of a penny.
eighth of a penny.
That in
And the
turn would
Republicans
raise
voted it
millions,
down.
which could be leveraged with the state of New York as
Yeah.
well as the federal government for sewage improvements, both on an individual basis with supporting innovative alternative systems,
So,
as well as sewer lines in certain communities.
so we have a well, we have an old, our house is 33 years old. To get a new sewage, to not have the, what is it? To not have our old system.
Cesspool
Yeah,
or,
cesspool, isn't it, it's like 70,000, there are rebates, but isn't it like $70,000 if you wanna redo your cesspool?
no, that's highly
I
inflated.
know all the new houses have to have that new,
Correct,
system.
that's a new Suffolk
and
County
it's
law that
nitrogen
was,
based,
it's to reduce nitrogen,
uh-huh,
which in turn collectively will reduce nitrogen in the ponds and the bays, as well as groundwater. So we're protecting drinking water as well as protecting bay ecology. As I said, that sensitivity to nitrogen in marine waters.
is the county making sure that all the new houses get that new system?
I think so, through their permitting process.
Okay.
The homeowner would probably not get a CO if a new system was not
Right.
installed with a new construction.
Did you see the 60 Minutes about the Colorado River and the water and how all states have certain rights to the water?
I did not see the 60 Minutes. I am aware of the
It's
water
such-
allocation.
It's such a problem. And the developers, they had one developer on and he said, I can buy an acre of property and I could put 10 wells on that property. I could do as many wells as I want. And what's happening out there is that the ground is literally sinking because they're sucking all the water out from underneath it.
Subsidence, they call that, and yes, and
That could happen out here.
sure, and that's what I'm talking about with the depletion of the groundwater bubble.
Yeah,
And then
It's a
you're
single source
shrinking it,
aquifer.
and then you're allowing seawater to come in subterranean. That's saltwater intrusion. And that's all based on the volume of your bank account, your
water
groundwater
that-
supply.
Yeah, the water.
And if that shrinks down because we're wasting it on frivolous irrigation at 10 in the morning in a summer day when it just rained 4 inches for the
That
last
night,
3
yeah.
days, that's a problem. And we're going to rue the day if we don't change our.
And how can we stop those sprinkler people?
It's not sprinkler people, it's homeowners that have to direct and,
That's what I meant,
and-
the homeowners and the
yeah,
golf courses.
basically calibrate their systems so they're not wasting water.
It's so
And
easy.
if, what I'm finding over the last several years, because the water authority has been sounding the alarm in the summer for water hogs and the threat of water supply, but people aren't getting it or still wasting water. So, imposing regulations may be necessary or very costly, we'll call it a sin tax on overuse.
It's so easy to reset your sprinkler system. It's basically a clock and you turn it and you set the minutes and you set the time and then
One of the
you skip
legislators,
days, you make it like once a week or
Yes.
you know, and if you know it's gonna rain, turn it off.
One of the legislators has proposed, and I'm not sure where this went, but ultimately to have some form of a rain gauge, which would shut the system down, because, you know, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. I
that's
don't know.
disturbing
You
when
just
you.
go like this
Yeah.
and turn it off.
Yes, manually, of course.
Yeah, and it's good for everything to dry out a bit, because then when it rains, the roots have to go
Yeah,
deeper
it's-
and they conserve the water.
Water conservation.
So easy.
Wildlife conservation, it's so important. And, you know, I'm stressing to you that where we live, surrounded by water, you know, all of the creeks and harbors, you know, these arteries coming into, you know, again, it's a real interaction. If we're not very thoughtful about water use and water conservation, we're gonna have real problems in the future as to the quality of that potable water, drinkable water that's safe, but is also the supply, that it's depleted or tainted by either chemicals or salt water that is
Yeah.
rendered useless.
Well, chemicals, the pesticides are the worst offenders. It's like water everywhere and not a drop to
You
drink
know,
if
there's,
we,
the pesticide use is
over the top.
over the top. It's a
Over
good
the
way to
top, it's
describe it.
crazy. And we need those pollinators, we need those, that's a natural system, nature is set up to work. I mean, if you, with such a beautiful planet, with things growing everywhere, and you think about fruits all in like different colorful packages that you just pick off a tree and eat, and grain and nuts and there's everything. Almonds, I don't know why they're still making almond milk. I've stopped buying almonds because almonds take, what is it, 6,000 gallons of water for an almond tree? It's like,
So to farm it is
and
very.
mostly for export.
Yeah.
80% of the almonds are exported and they take an enormous amount of water to grow. I don't get it why people aren't carrying on about that, especially the people in California where most of the almonds are grown.
California locally, again,
Big
we've
water
gotta
problem.
start really transforming our landscapes into more native systems to protect water and wildlife.
Yeah. What about desalinization? I think there's new inventions coming very soon. I mean, to me, the push and pull of the ocean, the water from the dam, it seems like a natural form of energy, and I don't know why it's not been used as a form of energy.
Well, you mentioned desalination, that's different than trying to harness
Yeah,
wave energy.
it's two
Tidal
different things,
energy,
the energy
yes.
and the, but desalinization, I think there's a new thing coming where the water runs through and magnets pull out the salt.
Doesn't surprise me, I mean,
I think magnets.
I was living in South Florida when some of the communities there had to employ desalination
How
because
did they
of
do it?
so these were big facilities, very costly. But what I'm suggesting or saying is the technology was dated.
Yeah, it's
I-
really advancing
Oh,
quickly now.
I can imagine the scale to produce drinkable water is, you know, probably.
So important.
Yeah, and
So
probably
important.
so much simpler and more effective and less costly,
Yeah.
I'm sure. And, you know, unfortunately, that's the way we have to go because of our land use, you know, is impacting water quality.
All over the planet. Part of the war in Iraq was, they don't say this, they say it's about oil, but it was also about water. Because they don't have enough water there in all those Middle Eastern countries. It's a big problem everywhere. And then you think of the polar caps melting. I mean, the climate change is our biggest threat right now.
Absolutely, and, you know, I think we've got to really commit to the changes.
Yeah.
You know, one thing you asked about projects I'm working on, I've been really sounding the alarm for a number of years now.
Yeah.
About coastal armoring, which is this installation of seawalls in different forms, steel bulkheads, rock revetments, geotextile bags. But these forms of shoreline hardening are causing our beaches to disappear. We will end up with land and water without that transitional zone of tidal wetlands and sandy beaches. So recreation is impacted, coastal resiliency. And again, we've got to really start to control the amount of walls that are coming into our region.
The wall in Montauk did not work. It got all uncovered instantly the first storm.
Within the
did
first
it?
year. They've
Yeah, and
East
those
Hampton
big
Town has spent
geotextile bags are like almost 6 foot long and 3.5 foot wide and
7
this
tons
high.
each. And it
1.7
runs about
1.7 tons each.
Forget the weight of them.
Yeah.
I thought they
Yeah, like 4,000 pounds.
they're,
Yeah,
that's
big.
correct, yes.
But the ocean can take down houses in in an instant in a big storm. Fire
Right.
Island, when I was a child, Hurricane Donna took down like 5 houses, big houses, right into the sea.
Well, it's a barrier island,
Yeah.
nature intends it to roll over.
Yeah,
We're going down a very costly path of sand replenishment, pumping sand for beaches as they erode with climate change.
and it's just so silly.
Very costly, the
And
lifespan
it's
is
gone for a storm.
correct.
Yeah,
And then there's another $15-20 million to pump a mile of beach, which
Yeah.
will only get more costly with time, as well as impractical when you consider a very limited number of companies capable of dredging offshore.
so
with
expensive.
every
Yeah.
community up and down the eastern seaboard experiencing erosion from climate change, clamoring for sand.
And water rising.
We won't keep pace with sand replenishment.
No.
So,
So what is the answer?
it's a hard statement. It was stated by somebody else recently, do nothing, which means allow
Nature to
nature take its course. Homes will be lost over time.
Don't build right on the edge.
But we've got to restrict and not allow rebuilds, so the coastline can migrate and move as it defines its own limits. And if we do this, we will be assured of walkable beaches and habitat. So horseshoe crabs, shorebirds,
Right.
you and I taking a stroll
Nice walk on the beach.
a nice walk on the beach.
Yeah.
And that's
That's why we're here, for the ocean and the
absolutely.
beach.
It's all about our
Every
water
day.
in this region, and
It's so beautiful.
again, if we don't invest ourselves in corrective actions individually, and then really insisting upon our elected
Yeah,
officials that they
advocacy.
focus on
Yeah.
this.
Yes, stay on them.
And I find they kick the can down the road all too
Always.
often because they don't want to deal with the hard decisions.
Well, the Clean Water Act is so important. So we're out of time.
It was a pleasure.
But thank you
sharing.
so much for the work you do.
Thank you, Judy.
It's so important. Kevin McAllister, Defend H2O, get involved, do what you can, let your yard go wild, leave the grass on the ground when you mow it. Don't mow it so often.
Yeah.
Leave the leaves.
Yeah.
Make
Composting.
great, yeah. Leaves in your garden. You'll have a beautiful, beautiful lawn if you let it go. Anyway, thank you so
Wonderful.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the ladies' room, and we hope to see you next week. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.